effusive, truly effusive praise for authoritarian leaders from former President Donald Trump during an interview last night on Fox News. Here's what he said.
They're all top of the line. Our guy's not top of the line, never was. These are top of the line people at the top of their game. President Xi is a brilliant man. If you went all over Hollywood to look for somebody to play the role of President Xi, you couldn't find it. There's nobody like that. The look, the brain, the whole thing. We had a great relationship. We got along so well. There was a great chemistry we had. Great. We talked about everything. A great chemistry. But people ask me, how smart is she? I said, top of the line. You never met anybody smarter. How smart is Kim Jong-un? Top of the line. You know, people say, oh, this and that. Really smart. You know, when you come out and as a young man at 24, 23, even though he sort of inherits it, most people, when they inherit, they lose it. And that's easy stuff. He took over a country of very smart people, very, very energetic people, very tough people, at a very young age, and he has total dominant control. That's not easy. These are very smart. Putin, very smart.
It takes your breath away. I mean, Joe,
it really does.
Talking about Xi like a matinee idol, the Hollywood look, the brains, all of it. And we have to remember in the case of Putin, but we can go through all three of those. Putin right now is, for more than a year, conducting a war in which he's killing Ukrainian children. He's killing civilians, attacking their infrastructure. So he's always praised Vladimir Putin, but to do it at this moment in history makes it all the more extraordinary.
Well, and Xi has become more dictatorial over the past 5 years. There are two people, I read, two people who just got a small group together to protest in a seaside town, and they're going to jail for over a decade. You look what Putin did, very smart, really. You seize a Wall Street Journal reporter, very smart. I mean, he's been, again, you look at the people that he praises, and first of all, it's abhorrent that he's praising some of the most evil leaders on the world stage. And this is something that he did starting here in 2015 when he came on our show and talked about how great Vladimir Putin was and how horrible Barack Obama was. And when we said, yeah, but he kills journalists, he kills politicians, he said, well, we kill people too. Again, there's something really screwed up in the way he looks at the world. And I must say, very disturbing for the cult-like followers that he still has that will worship a guy who worships the biggest tyrants on the globe. Katty K, on top of that, Donald Trump is alone in calling Vladimir Putin very shrewd, very smart. The guy has wrecked Russia's military. He's wrecked Russia's economy. I don't care what all of these articles say about, oh, it's not as bad as that. No, he's wrecked the economy. He's ruined their trade, at least for now, with Europeans as far as energy goes. He had Europe energy dependent on him. No more. And President Xi, one mistake after another over the past 5 years. And here's a guy who wants to run for president against Ron DeSantis' COVID lockdowns. He's worshiping President Xi, who had the most tyrannical COVID lockdowns on the globe. And again, this is, I don't know, is it projection? Is it confession? I'm not sure what, but it is so unbecoming of a former American president, and it speaks to his lust for authoritarian power.
You almost wonder whether he's doubling down on previous positions because he can't bring himself to admit that maybe he was wrong when he was president in his assessment of these authoritarian leaders, and so he has to say, no, I still believe it. But, I mean, you run through the list of what those people have done. President Xi, who has crashed the Chinese economy during the course of his COVID lockdowns, is on the point of, doing exercises where he looks like he really might make a serious attempt on Taiwan. President Putin, who has just managed to expand NATO's border by 800 miles with Russia, doesn't look like a very good strategic move, has lost hundreds of thousands of his own troops in Ukraine in a war that it just hasn't won him anything. And perhaps the most startling at all is his assessment of Kim Jong-un in South Korea, where he says he's totally dominant and that he had inherited this, but he has a very energetic, very smart people. Well, he has a people that is totally oppressed by a police state and risk going into a concentration camp if they do anything in terms of trying to oppose him. And the degree to which Trump admires these leaders who are dictators, and in the case of Kim Jong-un, certainly a really aggressive police state, ruthless leader of his own people. It's astonishing to hear him say this, let alone she's the look, whatever that means, the Hollywood look. I mean, is that really perhaps what it's really all about? That he likes the look and the feel and the power of these people and wishes he had had it himself?
Absolutely. That's always what it's about, the look for him. And Michael Steele, we know that Donald Trump continues to grow his lead in this early polling in the Republican primary. Another poll yesterday showed his lead over Ron DeSantis even bigger than it was before the arraignment last week. But we also know that ABC Ipsos poll shows broadly he has a 25% favorability rating in the country, talking about Donald Trump, a man running for re-election, not just in a primary, but he has to run in a general election to become president again. When you hear this as a Republican, even if you're a staunch Donald Trump ally, if you're somebody who's maybe looking around a little bit at Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley or Tim Scott, who we expect to hear get into the race today, what do you do with what you heard last night? I know it's not new, and I know he's given praise to these men before, but is this something you want to run back again another time as president?
Yeah, I mean, look, from Donald Trump's perspective, first to start with that, so you kind of set the floor, and I think the bottom line is Donald Trump looks at these men and he says, if I had that kind of power, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I wouldn't have to worry about a rogue prosecutor in New York. I wouldn't have to worry about a rogue prosecutor looking into January 6th. January 6th wouldn't have happened because the election would have been a foregone conclusion. The outcome would have been exactly what I wanted it to be. He admires these men for the power he wishes he had. And that's the kind of power he wants to laud over the American people, particularly those who stand in opposition to him, which brings you inside the party. What do they do with this? Well, they will do exactly what they did with it over the last 7 years. Nothing. What do you think they're going to do with it? Who's going to stand up and tell Donald Trump to shut the hell up? He doesn't know what he's talking about, and he is as bad as they are, which is why he shouldn't be within 10 feet of the White House. No one. Not one. Not one. Nikki Haley in her memos, she wrote a memo. She didn't call a press conference. She didn't stand in front of a bank of microphones. She didn't come on Morning Joe and have this conversation with this panel to say exactly what she wrote in a memo to donors. So look, let's understand the landscape here. Nothing changes unless they want to change it. Donald Trump has been, and will be through this cycle, the preeminent political dominant figure in the Republican Party. Why, Willie? Because that's what they want.
Yeah.
They want him. They like this idea of a powerful leader who can own the libs. Cavorting with dictators and mass murderers, okay, you got to give up something, right? So that's the attitude. There is no leadership that's willing to come to the table, look the American people in the eye and go, we're done. We're checking out of this. All the protestations and the complaints and the whining mean nothing because you end up at the exact same point. So Donald Trump goes on Fox. He sits down with Tucker Carlson, which is laughable in the first place because Tucker hates him passionately. And yet here we are having the conversation with the guy he hates passionately and looking seriously at him and just taking in every word. I mean, so guys, this is where we are with this party at this point. No one's prepared to come into the fore and say, enough of this. And this is the direction we want to lead the country. We want to put together a governing majority. These are the policies we want to fight for. There's no Joe Scarborough who's, you know, sitting in Congress and saying, wait a minute, hold up, time out. I get what these guys want to do in the caucus, but that's not what the party should be doing. So, you know, we talk about it, but we end up at the same spot every time.